Hi again, everybody. What we're going to do with this handout is this is going to be a review or kind of a putting everything together that we've learned about functional harmony. We're going to, of course, be talking much more about other harmonic features, but sort of in terms of diatonic functional harmony based on the phrase model, tonic, predominant, dominant. We're going to do a little review here to make sure that we're ready to go on. So this is going to be a pretty short video, just going to explain the beginning of this. This is going to help you review a bit and kind of put together all the things we talked about. And then on this sheet also, on the next page, is going to be the homework, which is going to be something similar to what we have here. So what I want to do to help us review for this is talk a little bit about stepwise motions in the bass. What I have here is basically a stepwise bass line. It's in C major, and what we're thinking about here is we're thinking about what scale degree is in the bass, number one. And so first off, anytime you look at a particular scale degree in the bass, you'll already have some ideas about what the chord might be, all right, just from the scale degree alone. And then the other thing to look at would be the motion of the bass. If it moves by step, there are very kind of predictable progressions that it might be. And again, we've talked about all these things, but this is gonna, if you just memorize what I have here, this will help you out with most situations you're gonna encounter because there are so many stepwise motions that you encounter in the bass. Okay, so you're gonna work on memorizing this information. It has to do with the bass scale degree, and it has to do with the motion of the bass, okay? So let's take a look at some things, just how, if you're going to start memorizing this. So again, what you want to memorize is bass scale degree, like 7, scale degree 7, and what chord it might be, given its motion. The arrow shows you the motion that it tends to move in. So by starting to memorize this, the first thing I'd look at is the notes that I put with open note heads. On the scale degree 1, 3, and 5, of course, if you encounter that, scale degree 1 in the bass will be a 1 chord. Scale degree 3 in the bass, usually going to be a 1/6 chord. Now, last lecture we talked about it could also be a 3, but that's pretty rare. And of course, scale degree 5 in the bass, unless it's like a passing 6/4, is going to usually be a strong dominant chord. So it could either be the 5, the 5/7, or the cadential 6/4, right? So again, these are just some chords that you could have here, but if it's the kind of functional 5, going to be one of those options. So start by memorizing those. Those are your kind of reference points for this. Now then at the very beginning of this, I've kind of summarized all the stuff that we talked about with the tonic prolongation handout. So if you see the bass go T, Do, then you kind of know it's either 5/6 to 1 or 5/6/5 to 1. Or in a minor key, it might be 7 to 1. You can also do that in a major key, but you gotta put a chromatic note. So T, Do, that's sort of a neighbor motion. Then of course we talked about scale degree 2 in the bass. If you have a passing motion, so this is the one with the D in the bass. So we talked about that. That could be either the passing 6/4. See if I can do this with one hand. All right, or it could be 5/4/3. So I can go 1, 5/4/3. Or I could do 7 to 6. In other words, these all sound very similar, right? Of course, also 7 to 6/5 could be done more often in a minor key. All right, so that's a kind of tonic prolongation stuff. Now, here's an important little point next. Notice how I have scale degree 4 in the bass. If scale degree 4 goes down, then that's probably going to be one of these tonic prolonging chords. If it goes down to scale degree 3, so 5/4/2, going to 1/6, right? Or 7 to 4/3, right? However, if scale degree 4 instead goes up to 5, then that tells me predominant, right? Fa to sol bass, I'm going to think predominant, and it's going to be one of these chords, the 4, the 2, 6, or the 2, 6, 5. You recall, that's the main predominant you always want to think about. That's the one that's so common in the repertoire, fa to sol basses. So that could be 4, 5, could be 2, 6 to 5, or it could be 2, 6, 5 to 5. And then lastly, I also show what might happen if you have scale degree 6 in the bass. If sol, scale degree 5 goes to la, that's going to be usually the deceptive progression. But conversely, if la goes to sol, that's probably going to be your 4/6. It's a less common bass line for that. In minor keys, more common. All right, and again, of course, this is not meant to show you everything that could happen because I don't have any leaps in the bass here, right? So the leaps would be a sort of different issue, but they're also kind of encountered in here. You can find them, obviously, if the bass went from scale degree 5 down to scale degree 1, that would be a 5 to 1 and so on. Or if the bass went do down to la, you would think 1 to 6, like we talked about in the last handout. All right, so definitely work on memorizing this. It just takes a little bit of time. You'll notice when we talked about how this works, it's just various versions of 5 and 7 that tend to be kind of equivalent. This is not too difficult to memorize. These are just your options. If you're given a bass line or if you're looking at an example. Speaking of which, of course, this is useful for various reasons. One would be analysis. Probably the most useful aspect of this is analysis. If you're just scanning through a musical example, rather than take a look at each chord individually, spell out all the notes, good thing to do first is just scan through the bass line and see what's happening. Get some ideas, get some expectations. That will speed you up quite a bit before you actually do the exact Roman numeral. If you saw fa going to sol, you kind of expect it's going to be one of these chords. And therefore, making the determination which one is just going to be a fast matter. All right, now with that, let's talk about what the homework is going to be. The homework is going to be on the next page, and I'll show you what it looks like. A flat major, rather long bass line with both stepwise progressions and leaps, but I want you to use as much of what you know as you can in this example. So harmonize it with idiomatic progressions according to the implications of the bass line. Make sure you put a new chord on every beat. I put new in quotes because, of course, with the cadential 6/4, that takes up 2 beats. But note, the third measure includes some figures, and this indicates a 5 chord with a 4/3 suspension and an 8/7 motion. So essentially, this is just a 5 chord with some interesting stuff above it. Now, number 2, use only the chords we have discussed. Don't throw anything in that we haven't talked about. And be sure to create a progression based on the phrase model. And, you're going to include this, number 3, you're going to include Roman numerals. You'll include a second level analysis. So the second level analysis will help you check that you've created a correct progression. So for example, you don't want to go to a predominant chord like 2 and go back to 1. It has to follow this sort of idea. And then complete in 4 voices, following the various guidelines we've talked about. So as far as voice leading, the main thing you're going to work on is resolving your tendency tones. And if you have, lots of inversions of 5, make sure that the leading tone goes up, the 7ths go down, stuff like that. And in the case of like a predominant to dominant, make sure you do the contrary motion with the outer voices. Create good counterpoint. If you can, try to create a PAC at the ending. Or try to end with do, I should say, in the soprano. Okay.